Hi, I'm Lisa Greenbaum. I am the founder of Sangha Yoga Collective and one of the lead trainers, and I am here to hopefully help you sort through all of the clutter and the overwhelming amount of information and marketing that's out there as you start to look at yoga teacher training programs. And so, first of all, just the very idea of taking what you love from your yoga practice and sharing that with others is so remarkable. And I just want to thank you for being part of the ripples that wave out into the world to continue to spread this powerful gift of yoga. And then, second, hopefully, I can support you by figuring out the right questions to ask, some of the key things that you need to be looking at in yoga teacher training schools to help you find the right fit for you, to find what is going to suit you best on this pathway, and understanding that there are a lot of different styles of yoga. There are a lot of different places around the entire world that you can study yoga, and what is going to make the most sense for you, what is going to be the most rewarding from a personal perspective, because this yoga teacher training journey is absolutely going to be a huge personal endeavor, but also how is it going to help you professionally be able to share your yoga practices that you're learning. So here we are. Where do you start? How do you know you're picking the right program? Hopefully, I'm going to be able to help you answer those questions. So, when I was thinking about putting this all together, I wanted to create some different categories to really make sure that we could dig into. So, first of all, is accreditation. I'm talking about accreditation of the programs that you're looking at and why that's important. What about diversity across the curriculum? Costs, including hidden costs. So obviously a training program is going to cost money, but have you thought about some of the other underlying costs that are going to be involved in that process? Also, online versus in person. So in this day and age, here you are listening to me chat online. There are a lot of different opportunities. And so, what is going to be the best fit for you personally? What is going to fit your learning style? What's going to fit your schedule? We're going to talk about all that. And then also after training support, because that's important. You go through 200 hours, right? That is the base foundational certificate and hours for learning, 200 hours. And then you go out into the world to teach. And is there going to be some support for you along that path? So, about me. Why am I the person to tell you all of this stuff? Well, first of all, I have been working inside the yoga and fitness industry for well over 20 years. I have taught yoga for and fitness programs for 22 years here in Toronto, where I live. But I've also had the opportunity to teach pretty much all over the world. I Previous to being the founder of Sangha Yoga Collective, which, as I mentioned, is a yoga teacher training school that I founded in 2022, I was certifying yoga instructors for almost 10 years through another school that I was the director of for Canada as well as for Australia. So, trained thousands of teachers in my career so far. And had the opportunity through that process just to connect to so many different people and so many different aspects of sharing yoga. Because there are so many opportunities to share this powerful practice. It doesn't just have to be in a fitness or health club or in a yoga studio. And so maybe I can open your eyes up to some of those opportunities as well. In addition to the teaching that I have done, and I've also presented at a number of yoga conferences across Canada and in Australia and in the US as well. But I've, of course, done a lot of certifications. And so I did my 200 hour, which was my foundation for yoga teacher training in 2009. I followed that up with a 300 hour training. So 300 plus 200 is what gives you the 500. And so I followed that up in 2012. I did an additional 120 hour of a trauma informed certificate. I've also done a number of other workshops and individual trainings within all of those years. I did receive my yoga therapy certificate in 2019, and then I did an additional training most recently, which was actually purely online. So I have had a couple different experiences that I can share from. And I did a 300 hour with the Sattva Yoga Academy to learn Himalayan Kriya. And I just completed that in 2022. So teaching, receiving teachings, really, just that's what I live for. This is what I have shaped my whole career around, and what brings me passion and fuels me. So hoping I can share a little bit of that passion with you. And as I mentioned, just sort through some of the clutter to help you make the right decisions. So I'm going to start first with accreditation. And so I mentioned that the minimum standard of education is 200 hours. Okay. Now, it's Yoga Alliance, and Yoga Alliance that's based in the US, though they really refer to themselves as a global operation. There are different yoga alliances across the world that are run individually as well. Within Canada, there is a Yoga Alliance Canada as well. However, just all of these organizations really have said that 200 hours is the minimum amount that someone should have before they're prepared to go out and start to teach this program. And truly, that's because there is a lot involved. There is a lot involved in yoga. And it does go so much more than just setting up alignment for postures and putting sequences together. There is a whole history and philosophy that is incredibly, incredibly important to this practice. There's the subtle body that we are having a chance to work through every time we move, step on our mat, or just pause and breathe. We have breath practices, we have meditation practices. And so this 200 hour really is what creates the foundation. 200 hours is generally the baseline that someone is going to hire you with. So if you have less than 200 hours in today's age, it used to be okay, but I would say now, and I'm filming this in 2024, that as of now, anything less than 200 hours wouldn't be enough to get you a teaching job. And as well as insurance companies. So having insurance to go out and teach if you are an independent contractor, they also require that 200 hour. So, and then just a note on that where I mentioned the 200 hour and then the 300 hour in the yoga therapy. So you might hear these buzzwords as well. So I think of 200 hours as like your undergrad, right? You go to post-secondary school and maybe you get your bachelor's, and you can get a degree in yoga these days, which is pretty phenomenal. And so think of the 200 like the undergrad. The 300 would be like a master's. So it's taking all the information that we learned at a foundational level in the 200s and really deepening that experience. And then yoga therapy is another at minimum 400 hours on top of that, and sometimes more. And yoga therapy is really looking at catering our yoga practices to the individual. So a 200, a 500 hour can do one-on-one teaching, as well as do group teaching. Yoga therapy looks more so at small group and individual, and we're also looking more at a clinical setting at that point as well. So I don't want to distract us too much because we're really here to talk about the 200, but I thought I would just clear some of that up. And then going back to Yoga Alliance. So right now, Yoga Alliance and Yoga Alliance in America is really the central accreditation body for yoga schools. As I mentioned, there are a few other entities out there, but Yoga Alliance really does have the strongest market share, shall I say, as far as being that overarching support for yoga schools and yoga teachers. And so what they've done, and they've been around since about 2006, 7 roughly, and that's when they decided that 200 hours was the minimum, because previous to that, people were learning yoga in all sorts of different experiences. And trust me, some were absolutely incredible and went far beyond even what the 200-hour can offer. But there was no standard. And so that's where the standards came through. And then in 2020, in fact, in February of 2020, so we understand the timing of that, they came out with elevated standards. And so they really looked at the curriculum and drilled down a little bit further to really make sure that yoga schools today were really aligning with a specific number of hours for anatomy and postures, but also a specific number of hours for the philosophy, for the history of yoga, for working with the subtle body, for working with pranayama, breath practices, meditation. They brought the nervous system in there, the chakra system is in there. And so while a lot of yoga schools were already covering that, as you've probably seen just by enjoying yoga, there are so many styles of yoga out there, and every yoga school will put their teacher training together a little bit different. And so what these elevated standards are doing is standardizing it even more and really just ensuring that the education that's being received is very well rounded. Okay, so definitely something to consider when you are looking at your programs is, first of all, is your program accredited by any education body or any accreditation body, period, right? So if you were to go into physiotherapy or any other type of work, chiropractor. Chiropractor is a great example because there are private chiropractic colleges, but there is also an entire body that supports it as a profession, right? And so this is really what we're trying to do here with these standards. So whether the school is accredited by Yoga Alliance, it's accredited by something else. What it's also telling you is that somebody else has looked at the curriculum. That and it's not to say that the original curriculum isn't fantastic. It's just that we all know that, and even when I went through the accreditation, and it's quite a serious process these days. It really, really is. And going through that accreditation process, I had a lot of the stuff in my head. But then when it came time to communicate it, it took me, once or twice to really write down in some deeper conversations to really be able to make sure that I was sharing it appropriately. And that's part of it. And just, a second set of eyes on any information that goes out is always imperative. Other things to think about with accreditation. I'm obviously pretty passionate about this because I'm spending a lot of time on this slide. Continuing education. Does the school that you're looking at have other opportunities for continuing education, or have they partnered up with other educational institutes where they're providing continuing education? And so looking at that as well. And so there's wonderful education partners out there that work in the fitness and wellness and yoga and Pilates sections of our industry, and big companies like CanFit Pro in Canada. There's also some provincial places like BCRPA that would be more specific to British Columbia. There's also a provincial in Alberta and in Manitoba. This is just in Canada. In Australia, we have Fitness Australia. There's also Yoga Australia. That are helping to just create education partnerships. And then in the US, we have ACE, American Council on Exercise, NACSM, There really is a number of different organizations. And so these are just things that you want to look at. You want to look at the person that's delivering the program. What's their education? Are there reviews up on the website talking about the trainings? And so do some research through all of those aspects to make sure that when you are coming out of this program, that you're going to be set with the tools that you need to get out there and start teaching. Okay. Another aspect I'm incredibly passionate about is diversity. And so when we're looking at diversity inside of a yoga program, I'm truly looking at all aspects of diversity. So among the trainers, who's presenting? Who's presenting the yoga material? What is their education background? What about the resources that are being shared? And when I'm talking about resources, I'm talking about reference books, texts. First of all, every training program should at minimum have the Yoga Sutras on their list. There are many different translations of the Yoga Sutras. The Yoga Sutras offer your baseline of yoga philosophy. That's where the 8 limbs of yoga are derived from, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And so that text, and depending on who translated that text, would be coming from India, which is the birthplace of yoga. Rishikesh is actually the birthplace of yoga. Among the curriculum, which I already talked to in the accreditation process is, or part of the program, sorry, is where is the diversity among the curriculum? Are you only learning one aspect of yoga? Who are the students that are coming in? Do the students have different shared experiences that are going to add to the group? And now I just want to dial into this a little bit deeper, which is this question of, is there an honoring of yoga history and culture? And so within the yoga community, and in particular, yoga teacher training programs that have come through in North America, different places, of course, in Europe, in Asia, in Australia, New Zealand. I'm talking about basically anywhere outside of India, and especially here in North America where I live, which I can really speak to, is that the dominance of yoga teachers and the dominance of yoga teacher training programs are really being shared by white women. Totally appreciate this is the body that I am in as well. However, at the same time, there can always be an appreciation and an honoring of yogic culture, of where yoga came from. And is that being recognized within the programming and within the resources, the curriculum, the people who are sharing the program? And so one of the things that is important for me is, certainly, I put together the 200-hour program, but as we move into the 300-hour program, that I have other lead trainers with as much education, more education than me, that have spent a lot of time studying yoga and all aspects of yoga, that are also sharing, that come from different cultural backgrounds. And this is incredibly important to honor culture, but also so we can create more diversity among the landscape of teachers, period. Okay. And then one more layer to this, which if it's something that you need, it's already something you're thinking about, which is, what are the opportunities for accessibility? Are there opportunities to learn if you need accessible resources, whatever that might mean, from visual or hearing challenges to even movement challenges. Okay, so just a seed to plant when you're doing your research is to really look at the diversity and what is being offered within the programming. I'm going to move into cost, because we know that a teacher training is going to cost money. Now, first of all, sometimes the costs can look inflated or they're expensive. I don't know how to say that lightly, but the amount of hours, the amount of training that are put into creating these programs for you, that's where it is. And what I've done here is just try to be as open as I can about the pricing and the costs that are involved in going through a yoga teacher training. And so, where I've put the cost here under advertised price as $3,500 Canadian, as I was putting these slides together, I just literally did a Google search. What is the average price for a YTT in Toronto? And that's the number that came up. Toronto's where I live, so I knew I would get the most information here. That price will vary a little bit country to country or even city to city, but this is going to be averagely and in general the price that you would pay. Okay. So, what else do you have to think about on top of this? Well, if you live in Canada, sales tax, depending on the province, could be HST or GST, but there could be, depending on where you live, there could also be sales tax. Now, the cool thing is if you live outside of Canada and you take a training in Canada, actually, that's getting too far in. Never mind that comment. ... Okay, let's look over at the actual price. Sales tax. Okay, so $3,500 is the average price for a 200-hour training. Generally, there will also be books that you're going to have to purchase or at least read. Now, sometimes those books are available at the library. Sometimes they're available at used bookstores. Sometimes there's a book trade program. I tallied up the books that we use in our teacher training program, and they came up to $250. So, of course, that is going to vary from teacher training program to teacher training program. And this is on top of the training manual. So most programs, you will also get a training manual with your teacher training program, but there are individual texts. Like I already mentioned, the Sutras of Patanjali, generally one. There might be some anatomy text just to help you better understand anatomy as you're moving into looking at postures and how to set them up. A couple of, I actually, because we have a trauma informed aspect. So one of the books that I use, which is one of my favorites, so I'll even drop it a line here, which is My Grandmother's Hands by Resma Menaken, a powerful book on looking at how to do some somatic practices and understanding trauma informed practices. And so, books are important. They give you a different voice and an opportunity just to look beyond what's being offered inside of the training manual. Okay. Other costs involved. Transportation. Where is the training? Of course, online versus in person. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Maybe the yoga school you've decided to study at is a couple blocks away and you can walk there. Bonus. Maybe it's in the next city and you need to drive, so you have gas expense. You might have hotel or Airbnb expenses. And so those costs, of course, may add up. Other additional, and I put some of these numbers together because they really, really fluctuate, right? So travel and transportation could be zero. It could be $10,000. That's probably a little bit too high, but anyways, it could still be a lot. Other costs, I put $100 plus, because this is going to be really determinant on what's going on in your life. So if you miss a session, are there fees for makeup times? Often there are. Okay. And what do those fees look like? Are there additional class fees? Do you have to take a certain amount of yoga classes that you have to pay for in addition to the training costs? Are there additional workshops that you need to take that you have to pay for over and above your training program? Do you need to take time off work? I see a lot of people that already work in fitness or work as personal trainers come in and do yoga teacher trainings. And that's where I was when I went through my teacher trainings. And the difficulty was that was more of the expense than the actual fees in the first place, because when you don't teach or train, you don't, there's no vacation pay, right? You don't make the money. And so subbing out those classes, it's another thing that you might have to do. And then insurance. So I mentioned insurance briefly, but if you're going to have to do some practice teaching, you might also need to get insurance. Now, generally, insurance, a fitness insurance or insurance, basic insurance for a 200-hour yoga teacher starts anywhere from about $150 for a whole year, and that gives you $2 million of coverage. That's the rates up in Canada. I know that they're not that different within the US or Australia. Those are the markets that I have spent more time in, but those are definitely, other things to think about. So, questions to ask. Some of those hidden costs, you've already got them in the back of your mind, but questions to ask as well. So, does the program you're looking at offer refundable tax credits? Okay, so in Canada, we have a form called T2202, and that allows you to write off the fees that you pay for your education against your income tax bonus, right? Does the program have payment plans? And what do those payment plans look like? Because that's also another way of really breaking out, that big bulky payment throughout the year, or having it just sit on your credit card. Are there recertifying fees? So sometimes schools will require continuing education. If you were to register with Yoga Alliance as a registered teacher, they have continuing education credits that they need. So those are just some other things that you will want to think of with cost as you start to add it up. And then that brings me to my next section, online versus in person, because cost is going to be influential here too. Now, the other reason why I wanted to put in print that average price, so just my really quick Google search, average 200-hour YTT price for 200 hours as $3,500, is because if a training costs significantly higher than that, why? Okay. And I would imagine there's going to be some really good reasons. Sometimes it's involved in a yoga retreat and you're also getting your room and your board and your food and a bunch of other things covered for you. Okay. It also could be the level of education being provided. The other question, though, which I think is actually a little bit more important in true honesty, is if it's not close to that price and it's significantly lower, why? I've seen so many advertised programs just on my social media come through $99. And granted, I haven't registered, I haven't taken them, but knowing how much goes into creating these programs, it it just makes me a little bit worried. So, online versus in person. The beautiful thing is, in this day and age, um, there are so many opportunities for both, and they can be truly and incredibly rewarding. I left these pros and cons just to try to create a little simplicity in the list, to more focusing on online. So, pros of online: accessibility. You can work all day, your evening sessions at 6 o'clock, you flip your laptop up and you get on. Or a lot of online sessions have pre recorded times, so you can totally do it in your own time. That is absolutely a win if you have a busy schedule and a lot of moving parts. Your travel costs, of course, are going to be cut significantly down. The other thing, and this is something when I did my online training, which was almost entirely pre recorded, was the potential to repeat lectures and classes, and to pause, and maybe you even did this a couple times with me too. Pause and just rewind. What was that again? What was that again? And so that was actually one of my very favorite things about doing the pre-recorded sessions. One of the difficulties, because the program that I did was based in India, and there were a few sessions that we had to be live online for, and they had students from all over the world, and I know they did their very best to pick a time that would work for almost everybody. But based here in Eastern Standard Time, it was, I can't remember what time it was in India, but it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night that they were starting and finishing at like 12:31 in the morning, which it's not 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning, but for somebody who starts falling asleep at 9:30, it was a bit difficult. But those are things to think about, right? Do you have to get up first thing in the morning? And how is that going to impact your life? 1 or 2 sessions, it's probably not a big deal. Other cons, immediate trainer feedback. And so most programs are going to have some sort of assessment in order to pass you as a certified yoga teacher. One of the most common is to film a video of you teaching, and then those are assessed by lead trainers or faculty, and you receive feedback. And so that is always a great way to get feedback. But what about when you are just learning the pose the first time? It's really difficult. And I teach yoga classes virtually every single week, twice a week online. It's very difficult to see a 3D shape on a 2D screen. It just is what it is. And because often online groups tend to be much bigger, it's even more difficult. Something else, in terms of class sizes, whether it's online or in person, to think about is what's asking questions going to be like for you. So when we're an in-person group and you've got maybe 10, 12 people and you've spent a few days together, hopefully the comfort's going to be there that if you have a question, you just ask it. But having, as I mentioned, trained many, many times and been on the being trained side many, many times, sometimes we get a bit shy. Sometimes we don't, we're worried about talking too much. And so what's going to help us really be able to ask those questions and get the answers that we need. And sometimes when it's online, we're hesitant to break the flow, and it's harder to get those sort of nonverbal, like, hand up or gestures to get the teacher's attention. Having done that teacher training online, and it was a 300 hour, so it was a bit more of an advanced training as opposed to the 200 hour. I loved the education. It was exactly what I wanted. What I found was missing is the community and the connection. And they did really try to put us in groups and create that community connection for us. But it's just difficult when you aren't together. And this is really one of the biggest pros that I want to add to your list if you're considering the difference between online and in person. The friendships that you build inside of these teacher training programs are, I honestly, I don't have words. They are so powerful. When you spend days upon days talking about just some of the most powerfully, beautifully deep subjects like the history and the philosophy of yoga and diversity and honoring culture and all of the things that you're going to bring into your world as being a yoga teacher. And we have these powerful discussions, and you get to know people in this really lovely, lovely way. And then on break, you go to coffee together, or you see each other walking outside at the grocery store and you have a little chat, or you both decide to stay in and have lunch together. And then you're starting to talk about, your jobs or your family or other things. And you start to find that you have a lot of common ground. I've seen incredibly beautiful friendships. I have developed some of my most beautiful friendships through these trainings. But also, even looking at future trainings, you end up, sometimes going on retreats together. You really do build a huge community. And it can happen online, but, we've all been online for the last few years. We understand the difference. And so that is something that I want you to think about. And so online versus in person. And, not all trainings are 100% online. Not all trainings are 100% in person. Sometimes a hybrid is also really great to kind of catch that middle, save you a little bit on travel costs and time, right? Because travel is also time. It's not always money. But then still have sessions where you are all together. So just food for thought. what's going to make sense in your life, how are the training sessions built out. Sometimes yoga programs too are every single weekend for 6 months straight, which can be tough if you have a 9 to 5 or like a Monday to Friday job. And now every weekend is in yoga training and you have friends and family. I have worked with so many people with young kids at home or younger kids at home, and it's difficult to find that balance because you want the time with them too. They're at school during the week. So how are those all split out for you? And the other option is, of course, going off to some faraway, beautiful, gorgeous land, wherever that might be, and doing your teacher training as a retreat. Beautiful, powerful. However, you take in so much learning in those 30 days. Sometimes it's really difficult to remember everything that you've learned. But again, what's really calling you? And if you're not quite sure or you're just kind of trying to figure it out, these are some of the different things that you want to be thinking about. All right. After training support. So I mentioned this a little bit right at the beginning, is that you finish your 200. And this is, one of the things about being in a beautiful, gorgeous tropical retreat area. And you're with all of these people from all over the world and you're learning all of this wonderful stuff. And then you go home and your teacher lives in a different time zone and the friends you hung out with live on the other side of the country. And we have a global world, of course, we can connect with them digitally. But sometimes it is a little bit more difficult. And sometimes there is no after training support. So is that something that's being offered in the program that you're looking at? And then when we're talking about after training support, what does that actually mean? And so mentorship is going to be, I would say, one of the biggest things. So when you are starting to teach, has there been a system set up for you to start to work through that? Is it part of your post assignments to get your certification, doing some practice teaching? Have you been connected with maybe a lead trainer or somebody else that's part of the program that can help answer some of your questions that you have coming up as you start to put your sequencing together, or you get out there and you start teaching and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I forgot what this is, or someone asked you a question that you're not quite sure how to answer. Networking is also a really powerful aspect of going through the YTT journey. And so what are the networking and follow-up opportunities that are happening for you to connect with other people? And this is one of the sort of things that follow off of building community in the first place within the teacher trainings, is that you start to learn where people live, what cities they're in, and then all of a sudden someone asks you, hey, I would love for you to teach a yoga class for me, but it's at my work and my work is on the other side of the city. And if you're in Toronto, that might as well be like 3 cities over for traffic, but someone that lives in that neighborhood, and then you can share that opportunity and those opportunities will be shared with you as well. What about getting help with teaching jobs, right? That lands right in there as well. Is there a job posting board? A lot of studios will create teacher training programs in order for them to essentially train their own teachers. Smart. Of course it's smart, right? But also, often those training programs have 15, 20, 30 students in them. How many teaching jobs are really open and available? And so if that is one of the avenues that you're working through, where else can you start to take some of the opportunities for you to go out and share yoga? And is there any assistance with that? Follow-up questions, I mentioned that a little bit with the mentorship piece. Who do you ask? Do you still have a connection with your trainer? Or with the organization or with faculty members that even 3 years from now, 5 years from now, I get messages sometimes from students that I trained 6, 7 years ago, and they've been offered a job and they're questioning the pay, and they'll just send me a quick message and say, hey, what do you think of this? Because they don't necessarily know other people in the industry, and I'm happy to provide that information, or even more specialized questions around particular postures or sequencing or helping with modifications. And then, does your school or program offer any further or specialized trainings? And so, as I mentioned, your 200 hours, you're foundational. But so often we go through the 200, we get out there, start teaching, and we find that we are really attracted to a very niche group of individuals. And because the 200 hour is generally a generalized training program, are there other resources to help you really move into these more specialized aspects? And one of the things about yoga teaching, you've probably already seen, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of yoga teachers out there. However, with that, there are still enormous opportunities, because there are so many people out there who maybe don't think yoga is for them. And so are there different opportunities that you can create or do a little more specialized training to really move into a specific niche and build your career as a teacher? And then community connection. And so how are you going to stay connected to the community as you move out into the world? And one of the things is, well, you can take specialized trainings, and so you keep coming back and you get to work with the trainer again and you get to see your friends again. But every time you do that, you have to pay for trainings again. And or maybe usually workshops are maybe 2, 3, 4 hours, and they tend to be a little bit financially viable for people. But when we're talking about trainings, like you saw how much the 200-hour training is, maybe that's not an issue for you. Maybe it is. And so is there opportunities for you to stay connected to your community that don't always mean that you have to spend a lot of money to stay connected? Because community is so very important. And I didn't mention what Sangha, the yoga school that I founded, Sangha Yoga Collective. Sangha means community. So for me, community is incredibly important. It's what drives me, and it's where I get all of my fuel to get out there and keep doing what I'm doing. But just being able to watch the people that I have connected and interacted with and taught in any capacity, whether that is, in the fitness studio that I work at, in the yoga studios that I've taught at, or other teachers that I've had a chance to certify, and watch them go out and share yoga, and just continuing to have us come together. It's beautiful. So community, let that be part of your journey. Let it be a huge part of your journey. And so, just in closing, I just want to thank you. Thank you for listening to me as I went through all of these different aspects that I wanted you to think about as you start to, put the pieces together about you taking a yoga teacher training program. And also, from the depths of my heart, thank you for your curiosity and your consideration to share this beautiful and powerful practice with others. As I mentioned, these are the ripples that flow out, and truly my drive is to empower us all to collectively raise our vibrations. And I know that we can do this through yoga and through this powerful, authentic, and collective experience. And so thank you for being part of it already. Just even thinking about doing yoga training means that you are already part of it. So thank you.